Alright, so now let us implement our new project related to the if statements. Project. Alright, so let's create a simple program that will determine the letter you will get depending on the grade you have. So let's say you are an instructor in a school or a teacher, and let's say there is the following letters. There is A, there is AA, there is BA, there is BB, there is CB, there is CC, there is DC, and we have a DD. Okay? Let's say that to get an AA, your grade needs to be higher than 90. To get a BA, your grade needs to be higher than 85. To get a BB, you need a grade higher than 80. A CB is 75, a CC is 70, a DC is 65, and then we have a DD, which is a 60, and we have a final grade, which is an F. An F is when it is less than 60. So our goal is we input a number, a grade, and it will output these letters. Okay? We input a number and we output this letter. Let's go and write this in code. Alright, let us program our grading. So first we need a variable called grade, and it's going to take the input from the user. We'll say input, enter the grade. Okay? Now let us utilize the if statements. We'll say first if grade is larger than 90, then I'm gonna print you got an AA. Congrats. Okay, now let us just continue. Next line, instead of if, we will be using elif. If it is higher than 85, then you would say here you got a BA. Now, you would think, okay, 85, higher than 85 could also mean 90. But remember, we are executing this in sequence. So if this one wins, we will never get to this anyway. Alright? This is why it's totally okay to do this. Now, if I change this to if as well, here is the problem that's gonna come out. Now we will see two problems here actually, but bear with me. If I run this, and the grade, let's say it is 95, I'm gonna get an error. And it's saying this operation, this one, is not supported between instances of string and integer. What does this mean? What is the type of this? It's an integer, right? But what is the type of the input? So you are putting input, the program is taking your input and storing it in grade. But the input here is a string actually, and it is not a number. Input always gives back a string. So you're saying here, is some text larger than 90? Well, this makes no sense actually, because here it needs to be a number or an integer, a float, any number in order to be able to compare it. This is where casting comes in. Now, casting is just converting a value from one type to another. How to do that? Let's say this is a string and I want to convert it to integer. I would simply just do integer, open a parenthesis on the whole instruction and close it here. Now, this should resolve the issue. Let me just remove this for 1 second and run this. Enter your grade, it's 95. And as you can see, we have no errors anymore because we have casted it. This is casting, converting from one type to another. Now this returns a string. It was converted to integer, and integer is comparable with an integer. Now, let me go back to the other issue I was talking about. If I said here if instead of elif, if I run this and I say my grade is 95, I would get two messages. Why is that? Because when I use elif right here, if this one is successfully satisfied, then I will never execute whatever I have from elifs or elses. It will just be omitted. But if I use if and then another if, each condition will be evaluated individually. They are not related to each other at all, right? So you will evaluate this. If it's satisfied, it won't omit this. It won't ignore it. It will just continue and execute it as well. This is why if you want to use this format, you would need to say and grade is less than 90. Okay, now if you execute this and you put 95 here, you will only get 1 because now this condition is not satisfied because we are now specifying a range. You need grade to be 85 and at the same time you need grade to be less than 90. This is what AND does. It says this condition and at the same time this condition. Okay, now I'm not gonna get into this. We don't want to do that. We will just say elif. Okay, now if elif 85, you'll get a BA. Now if you execute this, you'll see that you'll get only one statement. Let's say 95, you got only one statement. All right. Now let us continue. Elif, this is larger than 80, you will get a BB. Elif, this is larger than 75, you will get a CB. Maybe in the next one, let this be 70. And now we have this. The 70 is CC. And then we have 65. Maybe I won't say congrats for a 65. But you still passed. So this is a DC. And finally we have a 60. And then we have a 60. This is a DD, almost passing. And we would say else. Okay, right now let's utilize the else. You got an F. Sorry, you failed the course. Okay, now let us run this. What's your grade? Let's say I got 71. We got a CC at 71. Now let us run it again. Let's say that we got 41. You got an F, you failed, and the program is ready.